I would like to call on Lucy Cummings, Executive Director of Faith in the Common Good, to welcome us and provide us with territorial acknowledgement. Lucy?
Hi, everyone. You can see me waving my hand on the upper left-hand side of your screen. Thank you, everyone, for joining us tonight. I think I can safely say that we are all here on this call because we share a moral belief in the importance of acting on climate. And the good news is that lowering the energy footprint of our faith buildings will not only help us to save money, but it is a vital way to role model climate action, both for our fellow congregants and the larger community. And in Ontario, this role modeling work, this building role modeling work is especially important because buildings are one of our largest sources of carbon emissions. So before I invite Dr. Saxe to help us understand the importance of this climate action work, I wanted to begin by acknowledging the debt that we owe our Indigenous brothers and sisters whose ancestors have taken care of this land for thousands of years and who continue to work on the front lines of communities across Turtle Island to protect and honor Mother Earth. Our benchmarking program extends from Hamilton to York Region, and that is on the traditional lands and homelands of the Huron-Wendat Nation, Mississauga of the New Credit First Nation, Mississaugas of Scugog Island First Nation, and 6 nations of the Grand River. I think most of you know that Toronto is derived from the Mohawk word Takaranto, which refers to where there are trees in the water. And the sharing of our territory is codified in the Dish with One Spoon Wampum. And that's a treaty between the Haudenosaunee, the Anishinaabe, and other allied nations to peacefully share and care for the resources around the Great Lakes. So we are humble and grateful for the opportunity to live and work and worship on this territory. So I will pass the wand over to Dr. Dianne Saxe. We're deeply excited that she is able to join us as our keynote presenter. And I am not going to go through her bio. We will include it. It's needless to say, it's impressive. What's important to know about Dianne is that she's fair, she's tough, and she's a great supporter of faith-based and community-based organizations who are working hard to walk more gently on the planet. So without further ado, Dianne, let me pass it over to you, and give me 1 second to bring up your PowerPoint presentation.
All right, and can you give me enough control that I can move my slides?
I can indeed.
Wonderful, thank you. Hello, everybody, and thank you so much for joining us on this lovely January evening.
So, Dianne, your audio is a little bit soft. So can you get closer to your mic?
I'll try. Is that better? Hello, hello, 1, 2, 3.
Yeah, how is it for others?
That's better.
All right,
so
I'll try.
And right, you should have control in the lower left-hand side of your screen. There is an arrow button.
Perfect.
You got it.
Thank you very much. All right. So, hello, everybody. I am going to try to run very quickly through a brief version of my climate science presentation because I think I have 20 minutes.
You do.
Okay, a couple of minutes of who I am, what I do, a few elements of basic climate science, and then something about what you can do, including why it's so important that you do it. Okay, so who I am. I'm a legislative officer. This is a rather peculiar creature. I am impartial and independent. I'm appointed by the 3 political parties, which meant they had to agree. And so I'm not part of the government. I am tasked by the legislature to report to them about how the government is doing on 4 topics. As you can see, I'm the guardian of the Environmental Bill of Rights, which is a unique an important statute that we have in Ontario, which gives Ontarians the right to participate in significant environmental decision-making of the provincial government. Now, this is a rare statute and something that I'd encourage you to take advantage of. There's a lot of information about it on our website, eco.on.ca, and I encourage faith communities to learn about it and use it. The other part of my job is to write reports. So I'm a watchdog on 3 topics, quiet little topics: environment, energy, and climate. Before I became commissioner for 40 years, I was an energy and environmental lawyer, and I have really been absolutely struck since I became commissioner as to how much worse climate issues are than I knew. And so every spare moment, I'm looking for opportunities to talk to folks like you about why climate change is everything and what we need to do about it. There are some great resource materials on our website. I'm required to do an annual report each year on each of these 3 topics: energy, environment, and climate. They are all on our website in both official languages. We also have a webinar for each report. And of course, we're going to be rolling out new reports, 2 new reports between now and the election, one on climate and on energy. That's where you find them on our website. Now, one other thing that I wanted to tell you about is this. I mentioned the Environmental Bill of Rights is a tool for government participating in government significant environmental decisions. But you can't participate if you don't know that they're happening. And so far, the government's done a pretty poor job in letting people know. They post proposals on the Environmental Registry, but the Environmental Registry software doesn't work very well yet. So if you want to know, for example, if the government is posting any decisions about, say, turtles, you can see where that red arrow points. If you go to our website, sign up there, put in your email address and the keyword you want, which in this case might be turtle. You will then get a free email to your email box every time the government posts a proposal or a decision that interests you. And that gives you the opportunity to comment in time and can be really influential. And it's free. We've sent out more than 500,000 of these since we launched the tool. I hope that you'll let your communities know about it. That takes me on to climate change. Basically, climate change is everything. And is it as bad as we thought? It really is worse. So I ask everyone to think about some young person that you care about, because this work is hard and it can be discouraging and it's complicated, and it's too hard to keep going unless you're doing it for someone. So I do a lot of mine for these 2 little ruffians, but you must have some small person that you care about, and keep them in mind, because that's why we're all doing all of this. Now, talking about climate change in Canada, we're pretty lucky to be doing it here as compared to, for example, certain parts of our neighbor to the south. Because in Ontario, most people know the basics. They know that it's often worth reminding them that 97% of climate scientists agree. Oh dear, sorry, people having trouble?
I think you need to speak up a bit louder.
I don't know if I can do that very well, but I'll try. It's been a long day already.
That's better, Dianne.
Okay.
You're closer to the mic.
Maybe I'll just have to hold it like this. So 97% of climate scientists agree on the basics. Climate change is caused almost entirely by us. It's serious. It's here now. The basic mechanism people don't understand very well. It's caused by greenhouse gases in the atmosphere, and they stop solar. The heat used to come in, go right back out again, and the greenhouse gases close the window and make it harder for the heat to escape. So it's like continuing to put water into a bathtub with no way for it to escape. You keep putting the water in, and the water level rises. The more greenhouse gases we have in the atmosphere, the more heat we trap. Now, the most common greenhouse gas that humans contribute to is carbon dioxide. And we have the highest level of carbon dioxide emissions ever in human history, possibly ever in the history of the world, going on right now. I don't have here the dot for 2017, but it was even higher in 2017 than ever before. You can see 1992 on the left-hand side. That's when the entire world agreed to the United Nations framework convention on climate change. In other words, that's when we knew that climate change was serious, it was an urgent threat to human health and to the economy and to the natural environment, and we needed to do something about it, and you can see what we've done about it. Now, I mean, there's lots of other good work has been done in the last 25 years. The United Nations set up the Intergovernmental Panel on Climate Change, which is, I think, the largest scientific collaboration, again, in the history of humanity. Been very successful in developing knowledge on a really complicated area. But the bottom line is CO2 emissions are higher than they have ever been, which means we're putting more and more CO2 faster and faster into the atmosphere every year. You can see China, when they built up their industrial capacity, became big emitters, but all around the world there are major sources of emissions. Slide 13 shows approximately where the CO2 comes from and where it goes. You can see most of it is from burning fossil fuels, some of it's from deforestation and so on. Where does it go? About a quarter goes into the oceans. You've heard of acidification of the oceans. Well, that's from carbon dioxide dissolving into the oceans, and that makes it tougher for everything that builds the skeleton, which is the basis of the food chain, and also where a lot of our oxygen comes from that we breathe. About a third of the carbon dioxide goes into soil and vegetation. You might have heard of the Great Greening in the north. This is quite a lot of carbon dioxide that's gone into soil and vegetation. Okay, I see Lynn still.
Yeah, so can maybe,
so hang on.
can I just ask you to...
Let me try.
So if, people are having a hard time hearing Dianne, so everyone who's on the phone line should be on mute. But I think the background noise that we're hearing is actually from Dianne's mic. So, let's see.
Okay, hold on a second. Okay,
Way
is that better?
Thanks.
Okay, it's all right. Awkward for me, but let's see if I can do this without dropping stuff on the floor. Oops, I just dropped stuff on the floor. Oh well. Okay. Should I start that slide again? 1/4 of the CO2 in the oceans, a third in soil and vegetation, which is good, but it isn't necessarily going to stay there.
You want a real phone in here?
You can put a lot. Somebody's talking. You can put a lot of carbon into a tree, but you get it all back when you have a forest fire. And the rest of it goes into the atmosphere. So about 44% has gone into the atmosphere. So what's happened to the CO2 in the atmosphere? So you've probably all heard people say that there are natural cycles, and sure enough, there are lots of natural cycles. And over the last few million years, there have been every kind of natural cycle you might want to imagine. There's an 11-year solar cycle. There's a hundreds of thousands of years cycle in terms of the way the Earth rotates around the sun. There are ice ages, there are volcanoes, there are differences in ocean circulation, but through all of those natural cycles for millions of years, CO2 stayed between about 180 and 280 parts per million. And we blew past that in 1860. Now you can see 350 is in red on this chart, and that's because 350 is the closest thing we have to a magic number. Our best guess as to the highest level of CO2 that can stay in the atmosphere for long and still have the kind of world that existed when I was young, which is with coral reefs and mountain glaciers and low-lying island states and fairly predictable climate, and the kind of world that our food crops evolved for. It takes about a generation between the time that we put carbon dioxide into the atmosphere and the time we really start experiencing the consequences of it. And about a generation after 1988 is where we are now, and I think you all know probably what's happening to coral reefs and mountain glaciers and low-lying island states in the streets of Miami and so on now. And in 2017, for the first time in human history, CO2 in the atmosphere hit 410 parts per million. We're now basically permanently over 400, and nobody can tell us what that means. So I'm from an evidence-based profession. I don't know how many of you are from evidence-based professions, but the critical thing about evidence is there's only one place to get it, and that's in the past. And there's nowhere in the past of human history that we can look to see what will it be like a generation from now when we start feeling the effects of having CO2 over 400 parts per million. Now, it's not just CO2. CO2 traps the largest amount of heat. You can see on slide 15 there is sort of a turquoise area, which is the extra heat that's been trapped by carbon dioxide. But you can see about a third of the extra heat is from other things. Methane, which is primarily from oil and gas and from animal agriculture. Nitrous oxide, which is primarily from the use of nitrogen fertilizer on fields, chemical plants, and the rest of it is refrigerants. And refrigerants are uniquely bad. They are artificial chemicals. They're made by people. There's no natural system in the world to take them back out of the atmosphere once they get into the atmosphere. And so they can be 50,000 times worse than carbon dioxide at trapping heat, and they may stay in the atmosphere for tens of thousands of years. So the single most important thing for everybody to do is not leak any more refrigerants, whether from refrigerators or air conditioning systems or anything else into the atmosphere. But you put all that together, and you trap extra heat and trap extra heat and trap extra heat, eventually it adds up. And this is what this 2016 looked like. And those dark red areas are record warm temperatures. Yeah, I don't know. There is somebody who still isn't on mute. It's making quite a lot of banging and noise.
Yeah, I think we should pause for a moment, Dianne, and try to figure this out. It's Donna.
Okay.
So there's, Jacob has said, there's a button at the top of your computer, and you need to make sure that you are on mute. So it'll be at the very top, and you can see if you press on it, says unmute my speakers or mute my speakers. So
Donna?
we've heard somebody coughing and...
Sorry, it's Lucy. So none of the people on the computer have audio. They're already on mute, so it's someone on the phone line. So if you use the dial-in phone, then you need to make sure that your phone line is on mute so we can hear Dianne.
That would be much appreciated.
Yeah, somebody is making noises. They're not aware of it, but we can hear coughing and doors closing, and it's really distracting for Dianne because she can't hear her own voice.
Well, anyway, thank you. Whoever it is, I hope you managed to get your phone muted. Anyway, on slide 16, you can see that there are some blue areas, which are the only places that are a little cooler than average, and that's the ice caps melting. Everything else is warmer than average, and as you can see, there's particularly hot areas at the high Arctic, and that can change the temperature difference between the equator and the North Pole, and that can change how the winds move. So these things change how weather moves around the world. Now, one of the things that I know is very common for everybody I know is that when there's bad news, the natural temptation is just to hang on and wait for normal to come back. And by and large, the normal that our crops are designed for, that our infrastructure is designed for, that our laws are designed for is the average of the 20th century. And that's that zero line on slide 17. And what you can see is we don't live there anymore, and it can't come back, because this only shows what's already happened. It doesn't show the impacts of the extra heat that we've already locked in from the extra greenhouse gases we've already emitted into the atmosphere. So we are marching steadily with our children into completely unknown territory. Now, everything I've said to you so far is about averages, but climate change isn't just about averages. One of the reasons I don't use the phrase global warming is because many people interpret that to mean that everything is going to be warmer all the time. And that's just not what happens. It means that the average temperature is warmer. But the average doesn't tell you the whole story. So if your head's in the oven and you have second-degree burns and your feet are in the freezer and you have frostbite, on average, you're probably doing okay. But you still got frostbite and burns, and it's the extremes. It's one of the big things that climate change brings us is more extremes, and the extremes do a lot of the damage. Now, in terms of the averages, this shows you a graph of the average temperature of the whole world. And as you can see, it's not nearly as smooth as the CO2 graph. It goes up, it goes down. There are years that it goes up, and there are years it goes down. There can be periods of several years when it goes up and down. Global weirding is a good point. But climate change can mean cold places get colder and some of the time, and hot places get hotter some of the time. Only 1% of the heat is in the air where we can really easily see it. 93% of it's in the ocean. And the simplest consequence of warmer water is that warmer water takes up more space. And it doesn't matter whether you believe in it or not. If you warm the whole oceans, what happens to sea level? And if you can see from that chart on the left, I mean, I'm not that old, and all of that extra warming of the oceans has occurred during my lifetime. Now, the other thing that happens when you warm the oceans, well, there's a couple of other things that happen. One is that warmer water holds less oxygen, so it's harder for the creatures in the ocean to breathe. And the third major factor is that storms are heat engines. So the warmer the surface of the ocean, the faster, the more explosive, the larger you can expect hurricanes and typhoons to be. Now, we in Canada are the luckiest people in the world. We're a long way from the equator, and most of us, at least in Ontario, are a long way from the ocean. So we're quite protected for some of the extreme events. But even so, extreme events have already tripled in Canada and the United States. Now, to put that in context, think again for just a moment about that young person that you told us you cared about. Because you don't want them in a car with someone who's a drunk driver because they have more than triple the risk of crashes. But our kids are here with us in this world where extreme events have already tripled with much more to come. Ontario's warming much faster than the world average, but it's very different from place to place. Some places we're seeing the frost-free season increasing up to 13 days a decade. Some places hardly at all. But it means when, not if. We know milder winters, less ice roads, particularly important for the folks in the north. A less reliable ice and snow cover, very important for some crops, for forestry, as well as for winter sports. We can have wetter springs, faster melts, more storms, more floods, more droughts. There's the 2016 drought. A lot of people in that eastern area of Ontario, the Quinte Conservation Authority told me that all the fire wells in their conservation area dried up. Those are the wells that the fire departments depend on to fill their trucks when there's a fire, and there was no water in any of them in the summer of 2016. And then, of course, in the summer of 2017, we had the opposite. So yes, definitely weirding. Another thing that happened in 2017 that you all know about is there were the huge number of wildfires on the west coast and of the Canada and the United States. But did you know that we're breathing that smoke? The fine particles, the ones that do the most lung damage, travel right across the continent fairly easily, and in fact, they can travel right across the oceans. In terms of money, it's having a big impact on insurance. This is catastrophic insured losses in Canada over the last few decades. This is constant dollars. There's no inflation in these figures. Obviously, do you think this is going to affect the cost of insurance? Do you think this is going to affect the availability of insurance? Do you think it's going to affect the availability of reinsurance? And how will that change our economy when people and places and industries can't get insurance? And how much worse is it going to get? Well, it depends on our emissions. This is a very optimistic take on what might happen in southern Ontario. But because emissions have skyrocketed so much, and hopefully this slide looks familiar, and because they're still growing so fast, and what you can see here is on the right, renewable energy is growing very fast, which is tremendously good news. But it's growing very fast from a very low base. And what's been growing the fastest is coal and then gas. And so we are in Ontario, our electricity is extraordinarily clean, 20%, only 20% of the energy that we use in Ontario is from electricity, and it's almost, it's more than 90% carbon-free. But we're still 80% dependent on fossil fuels, and the world economy 85% dependent on fossil fuels. And so what that means is that the world's carbon budget is running out. If we wanted a two-thirds chance of staying below 2 degrees, most of the proven fossil fuel reserves in the world can never be burned. And then there's other things we've unleashed, changes in the natural world, and how would we know if we were in an emergency where we really had to make things different? How could we tell? Well, one of the things we could look at is global sea ice, because it's a feedback loop. The more ice we melt, the more open water there is. The more open water there is, the more heat the oceans absorb. The more heat the oceans absorb, the more they melt the ice, and so on. So it's a tremendously important feedback loop. And this slide is not in my report because this happened after we went to press. What you're seeing here is a summary of all the global sea ice measurements ever taken. This is not thickness of ice, it's not mass, it's just coverage, places that have ice on them. And as you can see, the pattern stayed basically the same until September of 2016. And then it broke. So is it too late? Well, we're in for big changes. It's too late for that little person that you love to still have the same world we had. It's too late for Ontario to avoid major changes. But it's not too late to have an impact on what's coming, and our choices really matter right now. Most of this has happened on our watch. We have a chance to make an important set of choices about what's ahead. Ontario is doing a lot right. Putting a price on carbon, enormously important. The coal plant closure is very important, especially for air quality and everybody who breathes. Technology is improving really fast. There are no toilets on this bus. What this is showing is that you can, in fact, run buses on the gas from, well, you can see sort of what. Maybe those on the telephone don't see it. But this is a picture. There's only one municipality in Ontario right now that runs its buses on gas from sewage. Anybody know what it is? It's Hamilton. But in Hamilton, they're too polite to paint it on the side of the bus, so this is a picture from the UK. But the point is that we do have more and more of the technology to choose low fossil fuel opportunities and options. No one can do everything, but everyone can do something, and there's tremendous other benefits that come from reducing our dependence on fossil fuels. And here's one of the simplest ones. Ontario spends $11 billion every single year importing fossil fuels, and that does no benefit for our economy whatsoever. If we reduce that even 10%, can anybody think of some socially useful thing we might be able to do with an extra $1 billion a year? So what can I do? What can an organization do? Climate can't be left just to the government. I am rushing through all of this because I only had 20 minutes, but there we are. 3 things that I ask everyone to do. First is figure out your carbon footprint and reduce it 5% a year, and the benchmarking will help you figure out the footprint of religious buildings. The second is get ready to adapt to the changes that are coming, and the third, speak up. Speak to your elected representative, especially in an election year. It's the most important thing you can do. So it's not too late to make a difference, and thank you very much.
Wow, thank you. Spot on time. Thank you, Dianne. Your remarks are incredibly inspirational. So we have a few minutes for Q&A, and we are asking people to put their questions in the chat box, which is on the lower right-hand side of your screen. And I am going to ask the first question and give people a chance to throw some questions in the chat box. So, Dianne, I think, as you know, faith buildings in Ontario really face a conundrum when they're trying to reduce their carbon footprint. And because the most cost-effective solutions for improving energy efficiency typically mean a higher dependency on natural gas. So are there any provincial plans for financial incentives for faith buildings to switch to low carbon energy sources?
So I don't have any advanced knowledge of programs the government hasn't yet announced. Certainly, Green On is providing financial incentives for energy efficiency and perhaps some for renewable energy. But let's start there with that difference. So switching fuel sources is one thing, but the most important thing to do first is to reduce the amount of energy that you use in your building. Now, my synagogue went through this process some years ago, and we were appalled. We went through a benchmarking process, and we were frankly appalled to find out how bad our building was. But let me give you a very simple example. We had, I think, 155 of those tiny little incandescent lamps that look like a candle flame, and they put out the heat load of 55 people in a sanctuary that was only sized for 200. So every single Saturday morning, our building overheated. And when we changed the light bulbs, now we have LEDs, we managed to eliminate the heat load of 55 people, and we reduced our electricity consumption very substantially. So the first thing is, can you reduce the amount of energy that you need? There's an awful lot of noise on something. And that's much cheaper than switching your energy source. But both both the electrical utilities and the gas utilities do provide some programs. I don't know, Lucy, if there's anything else you want me to try to do. There is a lot of noise from someone.
Yeah, again, we would just ask if you're on the phone line, people on the computer are muted, but if you're on your phone line, please mute your phone line.
Okay, next question. Oh, yes, there's a question here about methane.
No, go ahead.
Wait for you. Right, so the methane is hugely important because although it doesn't stay in the atmosphere as long as carbon dioxide, it's about 100 times worse than carbon dioxide while it's in the atmosphere. It also contributes to ground-level ozone, which is a serious health hazard, as well as being itself a greenhouse gas. So I spend a lot of time nattering at people about methane. And I met with the federal government last week to talk about what they're doing to improve methane control in the oil and gas world. There is going to be a big methane forum in Toronto, I think, in April. So they have some programs that they're working on. But methane is a really big issue, particularly because the more natural gas we use, the more methane emissions there are. And as Ontario is switching to more U.S. gas, and the U.S. gas from fracking has much higher methane emission rates, that's certainly a concern. There's also methane from many other sources, such as sewage treatment plants. So one of the things, I did a special report earlier I guess last year now, on water and wastewater plants and the opportunity to capture methane from those plants and basically turn a sewage plant into a renewable energy center. Methane is a very good fuel. There's lots of things that can be done with it.
Good, Lucy. All right, you.
So there's a question, Dianne, about do plants process more CO2 than others? Do any of them grow in Ontario? This question isn't so clear.
Right. I guess the question was, what could you plant to sop up CO2? That's a good question. A lot of the science isn't clear. There's pretty good evidence that when individual trees get bigger, they absorb a lot more CO2. Probably things that grow faster absorb more CO2, but of course it's not just CO2. When we think about what to plant, we also need to think about biodiversity, and I still think the best thing to do is plant native plants.
Sorry, someone's speaking on the line and interrupting Dianne. So if who's ever on the line, if you could mute your phone. Thanks, Dianne.
Okay. I see some people typing about the Green On website. The Green On website is certainly a good place to go for information about the incentives that are going to be funded out of cap-and-trade revenues. But I'm a big fan of the benchmarking initiative that Jacob is going to talk about in a little bit, because knowing where you are compared to your neighbors is immensely empowering. And once you have that kind of information, you can also access the incentives that are available, as I say, from the gas and electric utilities. And I see Jacob's putting in some useful information in the chat box.
Great. Other questions? We have one more minute before we're going to let Dianne relax this evening.
Or go home and pack for going for Sault Ste. Marie, as the case may be.
All right. Well, Dianne, thank you so much. Very grateful. And we will make copies of this presentation available to all and send, and you will get not only a recording of the presentation, but a copy of Dianne's PowerPoint. So again,
well, thank you. The one last thing I would say is that in Ontario, because our electricity is so clean, it's much more important to save fossil fuels than it is to save electricity. Electricity saving can help with cost, but what we really need to save is fossil fuels, especially petroleum products.
Don't have any cold.
Okay, well, thank you very much, everybody, and thank you very much, Lucy and Donna, for organizing.
Thank you. That was excellent. So it's Donna Lang here. I'm the Toronto animator. I wanted to say there's someone on the phone. It's, I hate to say this, but it is a male. It's a low male voice, but I don't think you realize that your phone is not on mute. So if you can go to your telephone, there's a ringing right now. That's quite a high-pitched squeak. Just wondering if you could just press that mute button. Okay, here we go. I'm going to present the benchmarking program and hopefully not have noise in the background. Okay, a little bit about the background. We are fortunate to have a 3-year grant from the Ontario Trillium Foundation. Our target for this grant is 100 faith communities in the areas of Toronto, York, Halton, Oakville, and Hamilton. We are using Energy Star Portfolio Manager, which is a product and a program from NRCan, which is the Ministry of Natural Resources in Ottawa. It's considered the gold standard. And this will allow your congregation to track and improve their energy and utility performance, both electricity and gas. And we like to say that if you don't measure, you can't manage. So we're very happy to be doing this program. Very exciting that we're going to be finally able to measure faith buildings. This is our team, and I won't go through the names, but we have 4 regions as we mentioned, and you have the person that's in your region who would like to help you out in any way that they can. And then we also have an energy coordinator, and we also have an auditor. What does benchmarking mean? Well, quite simply, it means that you and your congregation will find out some key information. You'll find out how much energy your building uses. You'll find out how much money you spend. And you'll also find out how your building's performance stacks up to other faith buildings. Why benchmark? Well, there are 3 key reasons. 1, we consider ourselves stewards. People of faith have been stewards, and by reducing energy consumption in your building, you can be helping not only the building by reducing the cost, but also that money can go to helping the less fortunate instead of wasting money on energy. So we can use it for the rightful purpose of helping others. Second reason, why benchmarking? Well, Dianne was talking a lot about carbon, and benchmarking has been proven to help in the reduction of carbon emissions. Buildings account for 42% of a typical faith community's carbon footprint. This is, if you can look at the pie chart, a pie chart showing organizations. This data is fairly recent, April 2016. It's the National Inventory Report from 1990 to 2014, and it's Canada's submission to the United Nations. And it was submitted April 2016, so it's very current information. So one of the things you can do is to reduce your footprint at your building. Waste is another 14%, so waste at your building, at your faith community site. And lastly, transportation, and that would be getting to the venue and going from your faith building venue. And lastly, why benchmark? And this is the message that we're all very familiar with, saving energy and saving money. Buildings that were benchmarked have reduced energy use by an average of 2.4% per annum, up to a ceiling of 7%. This is data from the U.S. Environmental Protection Agency. And the other thing that you can do once you benchmark is you can decide where you're going to invest in your building, and you can look at what you can do for the least amount of money to be able to save energy and money. And also it can help you with your future planning. So those are the three reasons we say it's great to benchmark. So what are you being asked to do? Three things. Make a commitment to save energy at your building. Give us your building information and your consent, and I'll take you through a couple of documents in a minute on that. And then also work with your animator over the next 3 years to identify ways to decrease energy consumption. And we have made it very easy for you. So we're going to do most of the legwork here. One, our energy coordinator, David Patterson, will register your faith building with Energy Star Portfolio Manager. He'll put your data, both your electricity and your gas, into Portfolio Manager. And your animator will make a building audit happen. If you want to have them come, they will come and help you and do an audit of your building or arrange for an audit. We'll also provide energy performance reports, tools, funding information available, and also training. And lastly, we're happy to come and meet with your property committee, your finance board, your council, to be able to have a discussion with them as to what the benchmarking program is and what it can do for you. We're also happy to meet with you once you get your report to be able to explain and help you look at the results. Okay, so I mentioned we wanted you to fill in this form. It's the building information form, and we now have it live so that you can go in and you can see the link there. You can fill it in. It, along with the consent form, which are the two other forms from Toronto Hydro and Enbridge in Toronto, will take you about an hour. We have 6 faith communities now who have signed up in Toronto and some in other regions as well. And it's taking an average of about 1 hour to fill in this form and to also fill in the consent forms. The handy thing to have for this form is to have 3 things available: the year built, the square footage, and also the occupancy percentage. And that can be a guesstimate, but the square footage is very important for the performance report, and I'll explain why when we get there. So this is Toronto Hydro's consent form, which is an online form, and then Enbridge also has a letter that we ask you put your letterhead on, and also your contact information to allow us to get your gas data as well. Okay, so what do you get by participating? Communities that participate will receive 3 annual performance reports. You'll get your first report 2 to 3 months after signing up, and you'll also get a report in Q1 of 2019, which will have 2018 data, and you'll have Q1 2020, and that will be 2019 data. And this is an actual benchmark report from our very first faith community, St. Bridget's Parish in Toronto. You can see their occupancy, 40%, square footage, 20,000 square feet, year built, 1927. And if you look on the left-hand side, you'll see there are 5 different metrics that we're going to be using to look at your faith building. If you can go to these numbers, 2017, so last year, you can get a snapshot of what's happening here. So you can see that electricity has decreased here, whereas your energy usage intensity score here has increased, as has natural gas, as has carbon emissions, and as has cost. So it kind of gives you a snapshot of what's going on. 2015 is our base year in Toronto, and then we have 2016 and 2017 data that we will also be showing, so we can do a comparison. Now over on the right-hand side, we have a colorful bar chart, and this gives you a really good view of what's going on. So what's really happening here? Well, what is happening is that 2016 was a fantastic year. We managed to have reduced our, and we're going to use this score, the, I guess it's up here, EUI, the energy usage intensity score, as our key metrics. So here we're using it to look at different years for this faith community, St. Bridget's. And you can see that we did really well versus 2015 here. And then we climbed up a little bit in 2017 versus 2016. But if we look at the overall picture, what's really happening here is that we're trending well, because we have decreased our EUI score overall from 2017 to 2015. So the next report is what we're calling the peer benchmark report. And you'll get 2 more reports there in addition to the 3 that we just talked about. You'll get a project interim report in 2019 and a final report in 2021. And they will be able to help you look at a comparison of your building versus other faith buildings. This is an actual, it's an actual data graph that is reflective of a July 2016 study that was published by Faith in the Common Good. We did a pilot with the Ottawa Presbytery, and if you can see the red line, that's your average score. And so the faith communities, and there were 18 of them on this chart, the faith communities on the right-hand side had the highest scores, and so you don't want that. The ones over here had the lowest scores in terms of energy usage intensity, and so they were the ones that performed the best. This type of benchmarking will encourage you to share your learning and to improve your energy performance. And I don't know if we have David Patterson, our energy coordinator, on the call. I just wanted to ask him if he would explain the energy usage intensity score. David, are you there? Okay, so I will do my best to explain it. So the energy usage intensity score is both electricity and gas combined into thousands of British thermal units. And then it's divided by square footage. And it is also normalized in terms of the weather, and we use normalization data, that is Energy Portfolio does, that's a 30-year period. And the whole reason for doing this is so that you can compare your faith community to another faith community who might be in a different region of this benchmark and have different weather, but also you can compare it to a large building or a small building because of the fact that we're dividing by square footage. Lucy, do you have anything to add to that?
No, I think we should go on, and
Okay.
we'll have time for Q&A. But for the building geeks among us, it is a site EUI number, and it's the standard metric that is used for building benchmarking in this case.
Thank you. Okay, types of audits. I'm going to go through this fairly quickly in case there are some questions. So we have 4 different types of audits that we offer. One is the walkabout where your animator will come and give you some quick tips as to how you can save energy. The next one is the do-it-yourself guide. So we have a large guide and called the Practical Guide to Improving Energy Efficiency in Your Faith Building, and if you could say that, you get a prize. But that will help you. By the end of doing the fill-in on that form, you will then know where to start next. We also have Greening Sacred Spaces green audits, where our auditors will come and they'll do a half-a-day walkthrough. It's a holistic, it covers a great area, energy, air quality, food, water, waste, operations, and they will give you a 20 to 40-page report. And lastly, we have the engineering audit, which is done by an engineer. Sometimes it's referred to, and often it's referred to as ASHRAE. It highlights where the gaps and opportunities are, what recommended actions and financial costs are, and it's very, very complete, and the price can be from $7,000 to $20,000. The good news is that your local distribution company, your hydro, will give you up to 50% back on your audit. So when you look at $7,000, it could in fact be $3,500. Okay, what are we doing to help you out? We're giving you tip sheets, downloadable tools, webinars and events like today, free site visits as I mentioned, and also in summer 2018 we'll be launching the Faith Property Manager Network, which will be a network to help your faith building managers and share information. So next step, set up a meeting with your property committee, your environmental committee, your finance committee, explain the program, answer any questions. If you want your animator to come, we'd be happy to be part of that, and send us an email and we'll contact you. And if anybody's interested, please feel free to put your name in the chat box and we'll make sure that we contact you. Okay. Are there any questions? No? How many faith communities have joined so far? We have 6 in Toronto, and I think we have another 3 in the other regions. And we just launched, well, this is the official launch this evening, we just launched in January. Are they all churches? No. In fact, we have quotas so that we can make sure that we get all faith communities. So if that's your question, we want mosques, we want synagogues, we want temples. We want this to be representative of the GTHA. Okay, so each of the animators have the different regions, and I see many of you here. So Oakville, that will be, I believe, Laura, who's on the call. And Henry is here, French from York, and Beatrice from Hamilton. So Stephen Law's question, we did the green audit in 2016 and have since began to implement the solutions and it's working out great. Wow, I didn't even tell him to say that. Good. What type of audit did you do, Stephen? Can you write that down for us? Are there any initiatives for avoiding the use of plastics? Claudia, I am not sure about York Region, which is where you're from. So I'm going to ask Harry to help you with that. Can a community just go ahead and register without visit? Yes, you can. If you contact your animator, you don't have to have us do a site visit. and we can work with you without having a visit if that's your preference. At some point in time, that probably makes sense to have an in-person meeting at least with you and your group to discuss what kind of steps you want to take to lower your footprint, and we can help you with that. Oh, great. Okay, so it was a Greening Sacred Spaces green audit that was done.
There's a question about Energy Star that I'm just going to go ahead and answer. This is Lucy. There is an Energy Star score for places of worship in the United States that is not available in Canada, and that's a big reason for us undertaking this program. NRCan has told us that they would like to establish an Energy Star score for places of worship so that we can compare. So we have a national score that we have access to that would help us to determine the energy savings potential of our buildings. This program is, and the data from this program will go a long way towards working with NRCan to establish a score in Canada, and that's a big part of our objective.
So, Aki, I'm going to answer your question. So what we hope is that the benchmarking program of faith communities will trickle down into people who have businesses and who own homes. And so we're hoping that the whole idea of reducing your carbon footprint is going to be much more than just a faith community benchmarking program. We hope that's the start and not the end, in other words. Okay, Jacob, you are typing. I'm going to wait till I see that, but I think we're ready for you to begin. Let me just give a little introduction here. Bear with me. Thanks for your questions, everyone. Jacob Rothberg is Program Associate, Conservation and Demand Management with Toronto Hydro. And he's going to tell you about programs and incentives that are available to faith buildings in Toronto. But here's the good news. Keep in mind that these programs apply all across Ontario. So if you're not in the Toronto area, you can still take advantage of these programs and these incentives. Jacob,
so I'm
you're on board now.
Can you hear me? I'd just like to thank you all for your time tonight, and to thank Dianne for giving us that great rundown of the stakes of what we're facing. This is not just a casual thing. It's important, and unfortunately, I might walk some of the same ground Donna did in her explanation of benchmarking, because I think it's important. But what I'm going to do is I'm going to give a brief rundown of why or how you should go about saving energy at your faith community, and then I'm going to explain a few of the more applicable programs that Toronto Hydro offered. As Donna said, most of these programs are available in most jurisdictions in the province. The easiest way to find out is to go to GreenOn and just put your postal code in. It'll tell you what's available to you where you are. Alrighty, so just a little bit about Toronto Hydro. If you're not aware, we are the largest municipal electricity distribution company in Canada. We serve the city of Toronto. It's about 20%, 18% of the electricity consumed in Ontario. And by being the biggest electricity company, we are also the leader in conservation. This slide, what it says really is the sort of idea that you want when you're approaching energy-saving programs at your faith community. You want to approach it in a smart, well-thought-out way. And so, the best thing to do is you set goals, you assign targets for those goals, and then you create programs to meet those targets. That's what we do to meet our targets. That's what you should do at your faith community. This graphic here is what we call the the energy efficiency journey. What it shows you, though, is really the path that you will take. Now, this is designed around commercial and industrial customers, but as a faith community, you will follow the same road. You know, you start with the low-hanging fruit, and then you move up through harder to achieve things. But the point being is that you are constantly upgrading and refining your processes and behaviors so that energy efficiency is not something you complete. It is a journey that is, you know, that will keep feeding back into the future. Toronto Hydro is always, of course, happy to engage with faith communities on their projects. Please, you'll see my information at the end. Please get in touch with me. So, what can we do? One of the things we will provide is when we talk to you, we can look at your community, what sort of things you are suffering through, what you can do to lower your costs. These are some of the programs that we have incentives for: energy audits, equipment upgrades, efficient new construction, continuous improvement, alternative cooling measures. These are all ways that we will incentivize, Toronto Hydro will incentivize your faith community to lower its electricity usage and save money. So now I'm just going to run through a few of our more common programs. The first one is the audit funding program. It's very similar to what Donna just explained. It would be an alternative path to Green Sacred Spaces program, but it's neither better nor worse. It just depends on what you would like to do in your community. With the audit funding program, we will subsidize up to 50% of the cost with a certified energy auditor. And really, what you want there is, by starting with an audit, you give yourself a good, strong foundation of understanding what you can do, how you can most easily improve the energy usage situation at your place of worship. The next program that's very common is the Small Business Lighting Program. This is a program where Toronto Hydro and our partner in installation will provide up to $2,000 in direct install lighting upgrades. For the purposes of Toronto Hydro, faith communities are viewed as small businesses, but that's just a classification. What we will do is, if you sign up for this program, a lighting auditor will come to your faith community and will identify somewhere where that up to $2,000 of lighting improvement can be done. The business refrigeration incentive is a similar program to the small business lighting program, only it is for commercial and industrial refrigerators. I know a lot of the faith communities have large kitchens that they operate, and so if you have older or out-of-date refrigeration, we will provide advice or any sort of, we will help to pay for new equipment if you are upgrading an older refrigerator.
Sorry.
The retrofit program.
Because I can really hear people talking on the phone line. So, yeah, it sounds like there's...
In fact, somebody is saying something Bill. So if you just said something Bill to someone, could you please mute your telephone?
So, yeah.
I don't think they realize that we can hear them.
Hello. Well, anyway, Jacob, go ahead. I think you're just going to have to, I think you're doing a good job talking over them, but keep going.
If you can hear me,
I think you are too.
I'm good. Good.
We can hear you.
So the final program I'm going to talk about is the retrofit program. That's our widest, our broadest program. Basically, this is an improvement program. We have 2 tracks in the retrofit program. There's the prescriptive and custom. Basically, these are incentives where we will provide a payment per unit for whatever you're replacing, as long as what's being replaced is more energy efficient than what was there beforehand. With the incentives, obviously, you reduce the long-term operating and maintenance costs by installing something more energy efficient, and the payback on the project speeds up. These are some of the technologies that you can install under the retrofit program. LED lighting is the most common. HVAC, that's your heating and cooling. Variable frequency drives. A lot of space communities have very old pump systems that are running the water or the heat in their buildings. Control systems, air compressors, upgrades in parking garages if that's something that you have. So yeah, like I said, these incentives come in 2 types, but really what you should realize in this is that if there's a project, if there's a technology that needs replacing, always keep in mind that there's probably an incentive with your electricity utility, if it's an electrical device, to take some of the cost of that off. And, you know, we want people saving money, we want people upgrading their equipment, and this is probably the best way to go about it. So if you're worried about the amount of electricity your faith community is using, if you're worried about your utility bills, please contact me, please contact Donna and sign up for the benchmarking program, because knowing what you're using, being an informed consumer, that's the best way to, you know, improve the long-term viability of your faith community. Thank you very much. If there are any questions, I'd be happy to answer them.
There's one question here from Matthew, and I think it, yes, okay. So he's wondering if the incentives that hydro is providing relate to geothermal or geo-exchange. Can you answer that?
Okay. For geothermal, that would be a provincial incentive. Toronto Hydro specifically would not incent you to use alternative energy in that way. Similarly, I can see there's a question about solar energy. Solar energy is incentivized in this province due to the nature of it. We as a hydro company or as a local utility do not specifically incent you to use solar energy. The incentive of solar energy would be that by installing solar energy on a church or other place of worship, you would most likely be able to cut your bills quite a lot by net metering your project. That being said, we do not have specific solar energy incentives right now. Unfortunately, I don't.
Are there any other questions? I think we have time for one question before we move on.
Yeah. The programs I'm describing are, thank you, Henry, that's good advice, Charles Donnelly. These programs are, if you contact me, I'm the person who's been put in charge in the city of faith community helping out. But, you know, all these programs are applicable to all sorts of sectors. If you're in the city of Toronto, drop me a line and I'll connect you to the right person for the right sector. If you're outside, just go to your local utility's website and there will be a contact person for energy saving programs. Yep, you're welcome.
Great. Thank you, Jacob. So our next speaker is
Hi,
Jeff.
thanks, Donna.
Jeff Blunt. And
okay, great. Thanks,
Jeff,
everyone. And Jacob, that was a great presentation. And that was excellent, followed by, from Diane's perspective, too, as well. Very good information. Keep in mind that any of these savings initiatives that we're talking about, they go across the board. The fact that energy can be saved on the electricity side. You need to know what you're burning, you're using, so that you can learn how to save it. And the same goes for natural gas as well. Natural gas is, we do have incentives just like on the electrical side, and I'll go through some of that here now. Enbridge has been providing incentives for over 22 years now. We've been saving enough gas currently that would heat over 78,000 homes for a year, which is pretty amazing considering it's been going on for a long time. We do get into education for customers, so if you were to give me a call or you were asked for a walkthrough visit, I can come out and do that with your facility as well, depending on the size of your facility and what level of information you're looking for. I can be more than willing to come out and have a look at your facility. Also can give you an ideas on calculations for whether you're upgrading a boiler or some sort of a heating system. I can give you an idea of what type of incentive would be available for, say, an 85% efficient system or versus a higher efficiency system in the 90 range. For our programs that we offer at Enbridge, we have two types of programs. We have our what we call our prescriptive or kind of our fixed incentive, kind of like a coupon type idea. We have 20 different products that I'll go through in the next slide for that. It's fairly straightforward. This would be for boilers, which are typically applied to places of worship. The prescriptive program is good for certain size boilers, and then after that it goes into our custom program, which I'll go into as well. Typically these incentives cover the incremental cost of the equipment. Incremental cost meaning that you have the base equipment, say it's 80% efficient, and you want to purchase a 90% efficient unit. We typically have 25 to 40% of that cost available to you for an incentive. And you can get the incentives directly through myself, or if you're working with a contractor, you can ask them to contact me. Either way, it works out well. Here's some of the items that you can find in our programs that you'd see just through a prescriptive, and we do have incentives on these on the custom side as well. So typically in a place of worship, you're going to see condensing boilers, condensing furnaces, possibly a makeup air unit you might see as well. Domain control ventilation is really good, especially for places of worship. Basically what it does is it senses the number of people in the space based on the CO2 from the people in the room that they're breathing out, and it will tell the system whether it needs fresh air in the place in the area to control the amount of fresh air that's brought in. And if there's not very many people in the place at the time, this will tell the system not to bring in fresh air, which would require to be heated in the winter. So you avoid that cost of heating that additional fresh air. Again, destratification fans come in great when you have very large areas with a tall ceiling and all that heat gathers at the top. That's something else that we see a lot in churches as well, or places of worship. Into your water heaters as well. And again, as Jacob mentioned, some facilities do have food services, so contact us if you're looking at new natural gas equipment, or if you're looking at Energy Star appliances as well. Typically we do have some form of incentive available for you. On our custom side, it's a little bit different. It's based on the actual consumption of the individual facilities. So if you're looking at, you're a very large facility and you burn, say, 75,000 cubic meters, which is quite substantial, you'd be getting larger incentives for that savings, because if you're upgrading from a standard efficiency unit, say in the 60 to 70% efficient, which is 30 years old, and you're putting in a new modern unit, which is in the 90% range, your savings will go up greatly. So I'll go through an example of incentive calculation here in the next couple slides. So. For our custom program, it's based on a tiered program. So if you're looking at doing multiple incentives, or sorry, multiple different equipment, what you're looking at is getting your first tier that you'd find is if you're looking at a boiler and a destratification fan, you would find that you'd likely get into the 20% savings range, possibly into the above 20%. In that case, if you're over 20% in savings, which is the calculation that I would do within the tools that we have in our office, you find that you get 30 cents per N cube saved. So it can be quite substantial when you're looking at two different technologies. To give you an idea of the consumption of natural gas in different types of facilities, we find that in a congregational building, you can see there, they're about over 75% of the natural gas use is just primarily for space heating, which is fairly typical of most facilities. You can see there, there's also a little bit of domestic hot water, just for your hand basins, or if they do have living facilities on site. And the other one would here in this case would be for cooking, if you have a kitchen or you have outreach in your church as well, or your facility, that would be as well. So you can compare that. It's fairly close to an apartment building and kind of similar to a retail environment as well. To give you an idea of actual incentives that we would provide, this is a church that had replaced their old inefficient boiler. I believe the boiler was an old standard efficiency boiler. It was in the 40-plus year range. The customer was using around 28,500 M3s in a year, which would be fairly typical of a place of worship. Their existing gas rate costs are around 28 cents. That's all your all-in cost. That's your monthly cost, your delivery costs, and the cost of the unit without the tax. What you find here is that the customer is spending about around $8,000 a year right now for natural gas to heat their facility. And in this case, they've gone with a 95% efficient boiler, which is one of the higher range units that they've looked at. In this case here, they're going to save around 8,600 M cubes in a year, which is a 30% reduction, which is quite substantial. The other item they get from this too is that they get reliability. A lot of times when a boiler is 40 years old, that the reliability is not there anymore. The facility is having to spend a lot of money on upkeep of this old boiler, which is causing a burden to them, and so they look at getting a new unit. So there's another advantage to upgrading your unit as well as efficiency. You get peace of mind as well. In this case, they're saving around $2,500 a year. If I'm not mistaken, I think this project overall for the customer was around $32,000, which is quite expensive. But in this case, between the annual savings around $2,500 a year and the Enbridge incentive, they're getting around $5,000 a year in the first year of savings, and they're getting $3,000 a year of annual savings afterwards. So they've cut their natural gas from around $8,000 a year to around $5,500 a year, which is something that will be ongoing for the life of the new boiler. Also, too, for Enbridge, if you'd like to sign up for our Energy Solutions portal, this is another way of getting ideas on what you should do at your facility and things that you can look at, whether it be the latest energy efficient technology that's out there. If you want to do some energy savings calculations yourself, we do have some technical workshop videos that are online there for you to look at too as well, just to keep an idea of what's available to you. And also too, we have our incentive applications. You can always reach me for our incentive applications as well. And also too, if you have any questions after this, or you'd like to contact me or have a walkthrough, you can give me a call on my cell phone there, or you can even send me an email, or you can visit our website, or you can just call into Enbridge and they'll eventually get you through to me. If there's any questions, I'd be happy to take any.
So I just want to say that Jeff has a great software program, and if you give him the brand name of your boiler and the year, he can do an amazing payback. I actually gave him Faith Communities information a month ago, and I was sure that Jeff was going to say they needed a new boiler because it was 1959, I think, Jeff. Anyway, it's a very sophisticated software program that will say, here's your payback. This makes sense to switch up or stay with what you got until a later date. Jeff, do you want to add
and I think in that case, thanks, Donna. In that case, it was a customer thinking that their boiler was had to be upgraded, and they had professional maintenance on a regular basis, which makes a really big difference because even though that boiler is old, if you get a good maintenance company, they can keep it tuned up and they can keep it running on a regular basis. This facility didn't have that much consumption compared to the size of their facility, so obviously they were turning back the thermostat in the evening. They were turning it down when no one was there. So they were finding ways to getting around it without having to install a new boiler. So when it came down to thinking of a new boiler, I was able to get the information from Donna, who got it from the customer, and I plug it into our tool, and I compare it to an average 85% efficient boiler. And it showed that, yeah, there was some savings there, but it wasn't that great for the amount of energy they were using because they were already doing a lot of stuff by just turning stuff back and turning it down. So that really makes a big difference. People think, oh, you really have to have the latest and greatest. Well, you don't. If you have someone in your facility that's turning stuff off or turning it down when necessary, and they're on top of that stuff, that goes a long way towards energy savings and keeping your bills down overall. Obviously, you can't turn the heat off in the winter because it's a freezing issue and everything else that can happen along with that. But if someone's taking it upon themselves to do that on a regular basis, it goes a long way. And you can get thermostats that do that for you as well, or you can have small building automation systems installed that will also help you save energy, which aren't as expensive as a boiler, because that can be quite expensive for some facilities. In this case, too, the customer wanted a look at the medium efficiency and the high efficiency. Yes, the high efficiency still saves good energy, but the issue was that, again, that they were keeping it turned down and they were keeping their overall natural gas consumption down. So it really helped out in the case that Donna's mentioning. So.
Great. Lucy is typing. I'm going to say that it's 8:30, and thank everyone for your interest, and if we get a question here from Lucy, I'll circle back. Thank you for participating in the webinar. A quick reminder that you'll receive an email from us tomorrow with a link to a recorded version of this webinar. And great session. Thank you, all the presenters, and thank you, all the people that attended, and for all your great questions that you've asked. It's always really a lot more educational when people want to interact and ask questions. And the webinar will also be posted on our home page, facethecommon-good.org, but as we say, you will be getting an email tomorrow from us, and you'll be able to listen to the webinar at a later date. Thank you, everyone. Have a great evening. Bye now.